There's heaps of memory. Focus. There we go. Hello, welcome everyone. We're doing sequencing today on this auspicious day on the spring equinox, 21st of September 2024. So, what's the difference between Hatha Yoga and Vinyasa Yoga? Let's come back to that. Let's go back to the idea that, first of all, sequencing is each specific style or stream of yoga or tradition has its specific type of sequencing. What I was saying there was that the headstand, for example, is often done towards the end of a class in Ashtanga. Now, Ashtanga is the foundation for Vinyasa. Vinyasa yoga is what a lot of the yoga classes are taught at these days in studios, Vinyasa or flow, sometimes they're called flow classes. And what is Vinyasa, what is flow? It's based on Ashtanga. Ashtanga is the foundation. It's the first official kind of sequencing of a flow class was Ashtanga. At least in this last century, 20th century, we're in the 21st now, but in the 20th century, beforehand, we don't really know the records, don't really go further back. But sequencing wasn't, you see, we've got to consider that sequencing is all about how to create a certain flow, certain dynamics within a class structure. Now, class structure is, in the big scheme of yoga that goes back thousands of years, class structure, at least to what we know as a class is today, is a fairly new thing. It's only the last 50 it's westernized in a sense. When we look at yoga a couple of hundred years ago to thousands of years ago, it was always a one-on-one, the guru or the teacher with the student. So even then there would be some kind of sequencing, but the sequencing would be specific to the actual student. What does the student need? So this is, the teacher would say, okay, you've got to do this pranayama, this posture, stand on your head 5 minutes every day, do this, do that, and that's your sequencing. So specific to the student's specific needs. When yoga came to the West, of course, we need to start working from our Western model of like, okay, we put people in classes, we get 50 people in a room and we all do the same thing. This is actually not the traditional way of teaching yoga. We're teaching yoga in a non-traditional way nowadays. But it has evolved to be the way, the tradition, which is fine. This is just the way it is. This is where we're at, and this is what we're doing. So this whole sequencing thing becomes a bit more of a modern idea. You won't necessarily see much of sequencing there in the ancient texts. It's not really an element of it. And also because in the traditional texts of yoga, it wasn't focused on the asana.
It wasn't built. Your consciousness.
It was all about self-realization aspect. It was about yoga connecting, understanding who we are, the truth of our nature.
Whereas here it's like, oh, I'm going to an exercise class, yoga.
Well, yeah. So as far as an exercise class goes, we've got to consider, well, what's going to work, what's going to flow well in a general consensus of what is in the class. So, saying that though, let's go back even before Ashtanga, when we can go, we were just talking before, Amy and I, about Shivananda, because I spent just an hour, a little bit of time in Shivananda ashram up in Uttarkashi in the Himalayas. I was there just a few weeks ago. And so there, Shivananda is kind of like one of the original structures of modern day, let's say, Hatha Yoga. Shivananda. But it's quite different. It's the northern style. I think I've talked to you guys about this before. Northern style versus southern style of yoga. And southern style is more based on, it's like there's a few head honchos, let's say, who around about the turn of the last century, around about the early 1900s, these were the people who were bringing yoga a little bit more out into the mainstream, and a lot of them ended up travelling to the West, and creating a bit of a structure as to, okay, how do we present this to the world? Because before that, it was always that direct transmission teacher to you. You want to learn yoga, you've got to just go to the ashram and stay there for months, years with your teacher, with your guru. So things change when this idea of like, well, let's bring yoga to the world in a sense. So let's create some kind of structure to how we present that. And so we had a few different people, it was kind of all happening at once. We had Yogananda from the Divine Self-Realization Society, Divine Life Society. You had,
Is that who you were in the Himalayas?
yeah, I think so.
Shivananda. Stalker. There we go.
Does that say Uttarkashi?
Pardon?
Does it say Uttarkashi?
Yeah, it's the Kashi
Yeah.
district.
Yeah, that's it.
Himalayas, yeah, on the Shivananda.
Shivananda ashram.
Shivananda. Shivananda.
Shivananda.
Yoga ashram or yoga organisation.
So anyway, so we've got the northern school, which was northern meaning those guys who were hanging out in the Himalayas, and Shivananda was one of the main people around that time. He wasn't obviously the only one, but he was one of the sort of forefront leaders of bringing yoga into some kind of concise model that people would study. So creating books and texts, not just that you have to go to the ashram. Okay, now we've got a book on yoga. Now we've got teachers coming from there and teaching elsewhere out of just the ashram. So this was kind of happening around about the early 1900s. And then some of these guys went over to the West and brought yoga to the States, to Europe, to Australia. So the northern style of yoga had a specific flavour to it compared to the southern school. It was a little bit different because it's slightly different culturally, geographically, all sorts of things are slightly different. Different places.
No, I mean like what are the differences in the yoga?
The differences in the yoga are quite substantial in the sense of, like, for example, so the Shivananda school developed, or some of Vishnu Devananda and the other guy, Satchidananda, these guys all sort of created their own model, which then became also the Bihar school of yoga, which is now even, has been for some years, a yoga university in the state of Bihar, which is not in the Himalayas anymore, but this is where in Bihar there is this real kind of depth to the studies. So you've seen the books Asana, Pranayama, Mudra Bandha, Kundalini, Tantra.
Yeah, I think.
trust you've seen it before. If you haven't, well, now you've seen it.
What's that?
This is called Asana Pranayama Mudra Bandha. Swami Satchananda Sarasvati is the author, and Swami Satchananda Sarasvati was one of Shivananda's students, and he's the one who created the Bihar school, I believe. And there are a whole lot of these publications, of books like this, with this kind of, I've always got the little dot there and the 3 lines, like the Shiva 3 lines that the Shiva sadhus wear on their head, on their forehead, and a little dot. So these books are great, fantastic, a resource of, they've published now like many of them. When we were at the ashram earlier this year, Nicole, the ashram is a Satchananda ashram, so that ashram is directed in each of these guys. But Satchananda, this guy who wrote this book, and so in their bookshop they had stacks of different publications on yoga. So this is called Asana Pranayama Mudra Bandha, and this for many of the northern school teacher training institutions nowadays is their teacher training manual. So this is a classic actual teacher training manual. It's a great book to have, but my only suggestion is if you do get this book, I think I have a PDF version of it if you don't feel like buying the actual solid thing. Just remind me, I can see if I can find it and send it to you guys. But as the name suggests, Asana Pranayama Mudra Bandha, as kind of like the 4 main topics, the 4 main elements really of Hatha Yoga. And this book explores most of those in fairly deep depth. But what I was going to say is that particularly the asana is quite different. I mean, it's different. There's, of course, a lot of similarities. It is the same asana to some degree. But compared to the southern school, the main sort of person who started out was Krishnamacharya, who Mark learned from. And Krishnamacharya, he lived in Chennai, which is down in the south, and he formalized the teachings in a sense from his perspective, which then his main students were Pattabhi Jois, who then went off to create Ashtanga Yoga, Mr. Iyengar, who created Iyengar Yoga, Desikachar, his son, who created yoga therapy, and then there was also a woman called Sandra Devi. She was one of the first women to actually start teaching yoga. But if we look at, for example, like some of the postures are similar, but then some are completely different. For example, what's that pose for us? Downward facing dog, which in Sanskrit is? Adho Mukha Svanasana. Yeah? Here it's called Harvatasana. Harvatasana, which in this particular transliteration in English, they call it the mountain pose.
Oh wow, okay.
See what I mean? So we can start getting very confused if we mix and match the regional styles. Now, I'm not saying this is wrong, I'm not saying what we do is wrong, but we mostly, and not everywhere, you go to some schools here, some classes, where they might teach you in this way, if that's the way they learn it. Which is nothing wrong with that, it's just that's the lineage they come from. But generally speaking, in the West nowadays, there's been a bigger shift of adopting the southern style of, let's say, names and forms, particularly with the asana. So, as I said, this book is a good reference, but don't get too hung up on the names of the asanas. If you do, you might start getting a little confused, which is just natural.
Yeah, it's never come across any, in my experience, being taught in the northern style.
I've heard of that in Mountain, and there's something, yeah, they're called child's pose, something else.
Yes.
Rabbit is something, yeah.
What I understand is that mountain pose is Tadasana, right? So anything moving this part, like in a half beat, and also like in a downward facing dog. It is all
Variation of a mountain.
it's a variation of the mountain pose. Yeah, this is what I heard. I think this is from Mark mentioned that.
It's interesting to know.
Do they interact like, is that Sanskrit? What is mountain? What's Sanskrit for mountain?
Well,
I thought that's why we use those sort of
That's-
English terms, it's more of a
exactly right.
translation rather than
That's what I thought too.
I think-
So there must be something to that. It could be worth investigating that
interesting,
from a Sanskrit perspective. But I guess that's the thing with Sanskrit, it is quite a unique language, tone language, vibrational language, and also the meanings are often just interpretations. Because
What is that Sanskrit name of the mountain?
Parivartasana, I think it was. Parivartasana.
Yeah, I heard that anything with like Tadasana, Dasana, like Uttadasana, and these are all from the same root, Tadasana, mounting, like your body alignment, and from the crown to root chakra.
So they actually have a Tadasana in here.
Yeah.
But the Tadasana here is standing on the toes and stretching your arms up to the sky, and it's translated as palm tree pose.
Yeah, I heard that too.
That was really interesting. I just looked up what mountain is in Sanskrit and it's Pada.
Pada.
Yeah.
Pada.
But then when I looked up
Parva.
Pada.
P-A-R-V-A-T.
Parva. Right, so there you go.
But then when I look up what mountain pose is in Sanskrit, it says Tadasana.
Yeah.
So, sorry, just interesting.
So not something to get too hung up on. You don't have to too caught up in that. I mean, unless you want to.
Well,
Could be a good research paper.
It's just if you're in a class and you're used to mountain pose being mountain pose, you're going to be in a completely different position. Your students might go to a completely different place.
Not that.
Yeah, that's okay.
So anyway, what my suggestion is that, for example, this book is a good reference for you, generally speaking, but I would stick more with the Sanskrit names and English names of the poses. A better reference is Iyengar's Light on Yoga. Iyengar Light on Yoga. Light on Yoga is Iyengar's book on asana. And he's directly from the southern style, and so he's got this very specific way of describing the asana, describing.
I've got that book over black. It's with a yellow cover.
Yeah, I've got it on my iPad.
That's the one.
What's good in this book, though, is it has a fairly good. I mean, the asana is good too, but without being confused about the names. But the pranayama section is very good. The mudra section is very good. The bandha section is very good. there's not much difference in the names there. Really. Sometimes the pranayama names can change too, from tradition to school, a little bit here and there, the ways in which they're taught, but that's okay, that's just something we work with. But the main thing is just to realise that difference in the asana name. So in the northern school, for example, one of the typical traditions is the Shivananda, which is something I was just doing, as I said, a few weeks ago in Uttarkashi. And
In India?
in India, yeah. Yeah, I went to India as well. India. And a typical Shivananda sequence is you start with pranayama, and the Shivananda class is generally a 2-hour class, which is also rare here in the West to give ourselves that luxury of doing a 2-hour session. But we could say that tradition, it's like it's leaking down of tradition to tradition, not so tradition to where we are now. But in the first time, I guess, classes were put out there, there was more of this focus on, well, let's do us with time to be able to incorporate all the elements. So 2 hours was generally considered a reasonable amount of time to be able to condense.
No, you're cramming it into
Now
5 minutes.
now we're cramming it into 45 minutes. But yeah, so in the traditional Shivananda sequence, you had the first part was your pranayama, so you would do maybe 20 minutes to half an hour of pranayama stuff. And then you would do, and interestingly, in a hatha, because this is hatha, there's no vinyasa here, you do that, and then once you've done that, you go into your sun salutes as the warm-up, in essence. Traditional sun salutes, so not Surya Namaskara A and B. Traditional sun salutes, so the sun salute from that northern perspective, which again is different to the southern. The sun salutes have become focused on Surya A, Surya B, which comes from the Ashtanga model. But the traditional sun salute is focused more on what still is taught in the northern style. And you do.
Can you demonstrate?
I was just going to.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. You do. How many do you do? Quite a few. I think 21. 21. 21.
That's
So
a 2-hour class, though.
you've got a 2-hour class, so you've got a bit of time. 21 sun salutes. Sun salute sounds like an AC/DC.
That sounds really easy after yesterday.
Yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
good.
Let's see if I can remember the Shivananda sun salute. Come to stand. Let's see you. There you go.
I'll do a little bit as well, actually.
Oh my goodness.
Standing up nice and tall and that's it. That's not it goes like this. You bring the arms up, you inhale, and you arch right back. Exhale, bow forwards. Now we step back with the right leg into a low lunge section, inhaling. Then you step back with that left leg into a plank position. You drop the knees, chest and chin, Ashtanga Namaskara. And then into your cobra, inhale. Into your mountain, exhale. Then you step, so we step the right leg back. So now we step the right leg through. The knee to the ground, inhale, looking up. Exhale, step forward, hold forward. And then inhale, reach up, arch. And exhale, down.
That's what we did yesterday, wasn't it?
That's half a round, essentially.
And then
because
you have to do
you've got
the
move the legs
Yeah,
the
right,
other
yeah.
way.
Yeah, this is
So
one.
inhale to reach up, arch right back. Exhale, reach ahead and fold forwards. So this time we'll step back with the left leg first, knee to the floor. Look up.
No, we didn't do
We
that.
step back to the high plank.
Yeah.
Knees, chest and chin to the ground.
6,
Oh.
7,
Inhale to your cobra, Bhujangasana. Exhale to the mountain. Step the left leg forward now. Inhale, knee to the ground. Then exhale, step forward, fold the forwards. Reach up, inhale, and arch. And exhale.
This is the last video that Amy sent us in that sequence.
Yeah.
So that's traditional sun salute. And within the traditional, there are some different variations, depending on the particulars. For example, sometimes the low lunge could be with the arms up. It's one of the variations.
Wait, instead of sideways.
Well, instead of having the hands down,
Oh, okay.
because we were just doing it with the
Yeah.
hands down. So sometimes there could be a bit more of a low lunge vibe, or Anjaneyasana, as we would call it, with the arms up, arching back. But otherwise, it's pretty much that. That's traditional.
I think yesterday we did the same except low lunge. I mean like that. So when we fold and just
Sure.
step back.
It's a plank, isn't it?
Hand, knees, chest,
Oh!
cobra, up and down.
And
Same foot forward, second foot forward.
Alright, so you don't put just don't put the knee to the floor.
Yeah.
we didn't do that.
Well, there you go, that's just another variation. But that's what we were doing in Shivananda.
Gonna do it again for the night?
Oh no, I'm so sore.
I think my arms are short.
It's my hammies.
And so that's Shivananda, and then after your sun salutes, you come back, I think, sure it was after the sun salute, you come back to the ground, that's right, you come back to the ground, and then we do a few ground exercises where you do a bunch of things like leg lifts, so you know, left leg up, left leg down, right leg up and down, do that a few times for the breath, then both legs up and down. So you do a few of these kind of things. There was maybe a couple of other floor exercises I can't remember now. Then you start the actual sequence. So you're probably about halfway through now, yeah? Until you start the actual, let's say, official asana sequence, which in Shivananda is quite specific. And the first posture, that's what the first posture is. Headstand.
Oh wow.
So headstand is the first, even though you're kind of halfway through the class, but this is when, you know, the first part of the class is kind of like the warm-up. Breath work, pranayama, sun salutes, your floor core exercises, and then it's like, right now we do the actual asana sequence. The first one is a headstand. So that's why I'm saying that it can be quite different from school to school, place to place, whereas Ashtanga headstand is last, or nearly last.
And there's no real warm up, is there? Like, pose one is the first thing.
In this one,
Ashtanga.
in Ashtanga.
Yeah.
Well, Ashtanga you start with sun salutes. So your sun salutes become your warm-up. And look, even in this one, in a sense, your sun salutes are your warm-up. You know, before that, all you've done is breath work. It's pranayama. And so sun salutes traditionally that's what they are. They are the warm-up. The warming up the
So we
body.
warm up to do a warm up.
But we generally warm up to do the warm-up, in essence. And there's a good reason for that.
Because we spend most of our lives sitting at a desk.
Yeah.
When you think about, well, who's doing this practice, the Ashtanga or the Shivananda in the traditional way? The people who go into the ashram, the people who are kind of living yoga lives. So you don't need, generally speaking, as much of the warm-up to the warm-up that most of the Western people who come to classes because they've been sitting at desks all day, driving cars, they've been doing things that stiffen up and tighten up the body in different ways than if you're living in the ashram or just living your lifestyle. So I think this is where we've got to be flexible with the way we teach. You can't get too attached to, I'm teaching Ashtanga and the sun salutes are the warm-up, so no need to do anything before that. We go straight to the sun salutes, but who's going straight to the sun salutes? The students who are coming from the office, who are coming from, they need to move the bodies in a few different ways first before they can even do the sun salutes, in my opinion. Yeah?
I would
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's why when we look at our sequence here, for example, it's a little bit different. Now, we base our sequence a little bit on the Ashtanga because we're doing Vinyasa. Shivananda is not Vinyasa in the sense that once you're doing the asana, it's like we do a headstand. And then after the headstand, you lie down and have a little Shavasana. And then it's the next pose. Right, now we're doing shoulder stand. Everybody, shoulder stand. You do your shoulder stand. Stay there for a little while. Maybe you go into your plow or your snail or whatnot. And then you lie down.
Oh, so like Bikram, you have a little
You have a break.
Break in
Little
between.
Shavasana.
to let everything work through
And
your
let
body.
it settle, to assimilate the pose.
Which posture, how many minutes that you last?
So,
Each posture, like puja, headstand, how many minutes?
I'm not sure if there's a, look, I haven't personally done the teach training there, so I don't know in depth, but it's a little while, it's probably 5 minutes or so, something like that. So it's a while that you spend, and then you might do certain variations within each posture. So then it's like, okay, now we're going to do our forward bend, so we might do Janushisasana, Paschimottanasana, and so that becomes the sort of hatha way. And that's kind of like a fairly good example of what a hatha yoga class is. You're focusing on the postures, you're spending a bit of time, you might be workshopping them too, depending on how the class is pitched. If it's a beginner's class, then obviously there's a bit more instruction involved and showing maybe some variations and whatnot. If it's an advanced class, maybe you go into more dynamic variations. But so that there's a focus on each asana, there's a fine tuning of it to various degrees, and then the final pose is your Trikonasana. It's kind of like all the poses are 4 poses, and then finally at the end you come up and stand and do your Trikonasana or maybe Warrior 2, something like that.
Bikram's opposite, which where you're standing at the beginning and then you lay down to where postures at the end.
Well, with the Ashtanga it's like that. That's again what we focus on. So, and then for example, Iyengar is somewhere in between in a sense. It's like Iyengar is a traditional hatha It does have some certain set sequences, but it has a variety of different sequences. But with Iyengar, there is a lot more encouragement to workshop postures. So it's taking that Raw Hatha vibe, Hatha approach of workshopping the posture. And because Iyengar is very focused on alignment, there's a lot of use of props as well, even to the point of things like angle, ropes on the walls, chairs, all sorts of things that you use. But again, I feel like it's a great practice to do for a little bit of time because it helps you to refine the alignment of your posture. Really, you've got to go in quite deep. It was one of the yogas I practiced for quite some time. In India, I studied for a while years ago, Iyengar. And I considered actually doing my teacher training, but it's like a, I don't know how it is these days, but back then it was a bit more like you had to do an apprenticeship with Iyengar. So a bit more like a traditional way. You have these different levels. And you couldn't even, for example, go to the next level until you were able to do, or maybe even start the first level until you were able to do a 5-minute headstand. You had to be able to stand for 5 minutes on your head before you could actually qualify to start doing your training. It's a bit like that. So, but yeah, Ashtanga is where Vinyasa begins, and that's why we come back to Ashtanga as far as a structure that we can sort of we can base ourselves on, where we have the Vinyasa element. So when we say, like in our yoga sequencing thing here, we've got all these number 9 Vinyasa, number 11 Vinyasa, all these. The Vinyasas that are kind of like in Hatha is the Shavasana, in a sense. It's the integration part between your postures and between your sequences.
Like a reset or transition, isn't it?
Yeah, it helps you to reset, helps you to then also transition from pose to pose or from sequence to sequence. So this was something, and I guess what it is it's a more dynamic reset or transition than, let's say, a traditional Hatha way. No wrong or right. They both got their reasons why you do it. So obviously the Shavasana way is you just let the body relax and it assimilates everything. Yeah. The dynamic Ashtanga way is it's kind of like just reboot it. It's like a reboot. You know, you're resetting by working with a very symmetrical sequence. So don't forget, a lot of the postures are asymmetrical. That's why we do one side and the other side, particularly the standing postures. And then, so having a dynamic, symmetrical sort of sequence to just reboot the body back into place is useful. To create that reset. And so I guess one of the main differences is that, well, this becomes a bit more dynamic practice. So not to say that Hatha isn't dynamic. Some of those poses, when you're holding them for a long time, and you're doing, let's say, fairly advanced versions, it can be pretty damn challenging. I was challenged in the Shivananda, some of the poses there, particularly Shalavasana. When you came to Shalavasana, locust pose.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when you're holding that for quite some time.
I
It's a strong
guess
pose.
you people also have, yeah, don't worry. Like there's other things going on for a male in that area to kind of use your pelvis quite a
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
there's
you
a
gotta
bit of a
be, you gotta be mindful of that too.
Yeah.
Have your
Yeah, sorry,
adjustments
I
before
don't
you
know how to
go
word
in.
You people.
that. Different, yeah.
I was wondering who you were referring to.
Raymond Cito used to always say that. He'd go, and guys, you need to, yeah, he really
Tuck
told
it in.
yeah, it's like guys, you need to be extra mindful here.
When it says like, say, number 8 standing poses, 10 lateral poses, should you be doing multiple standing poses and multiple lateral poses to spread out
Well,
to the 60 minutes?
Let's now go into this, yeah? So I've sort of given us a good idea of where it's all coming from, why we have what we have today. Now, just before we do though, just to understand that, I guess, with Ashtangas being the foundation of Vinyasa, what I guess happened was this thing that, well, if you're going to teach Ashtanga, being a lineage, being a tradition, it was very much like, well, if you want to teach our lineage, our tradition, you have to stick to it. Which again is fair enough. That's being respectful of the tradition, the lineage. But you know, come into modern day world where you've got, well, you know, I've done a bit of Ashtanga, I've done a bit of Hatha, I've done a bit of Iyengar, I like to mix them up a little bit. And all of a sudden you're creating something a bit more non-traditional, a bit more unique.
Hybrid.
It's a jewel.
A little bit of a hybrid, yeah. And maybe there's again, pros and cons. Again, the pro is that, well, actually you're getting a whole bunch of different stuff all in one. The con is that you're maybe mix and matching a bit too much and creating a bit of a whirlpool. But somehow, I can't tell you when or how, there was this development of the word vinyasa as a class. Someone, I guess, decided to go out and say, well, I'm going to do my own version of Ashtanga and call it vinyasa. I guess that happened, and I'm not sure if we another thing worth investigating in research. But what that created was a whole movement, a whole new expression of, well, okay, let's have a little more freedom in the way in which we want to express and teach our classes. And so while we might base it on Ashtanga, we have the freedom to create our own version of it. So that's what the whole industry has come in the last, probably just in the last 20 or so years, is this movement into particular styles of vinyasa. So that now we've got all different other sort of subcategories coming out saying, well, this is the such and such vinyasa style, this is the power flow style, this guy, this is this thing with that guy, or that girl, or whatever. People who've, I guess, found their own expression of how to teach, based still on foundations, or you would hope so, at least, having some of that. But then now you come to a yoga teacher training where it's like vinyasa teacher training. So that's what we're doing here. And that's what most other schools are doing too, vinyasa teacher training. Now within that vinyasa teacher training, we could just say, well, you just do whatever you like. Because, you know, there's no rules, really. However, while it's nice to be expressive and to find your own way of expressing and teaching, it's still, I think, very important to come back to some kind of foundation, blueprint, that you can use it as that foundation, and then you can expand or be creative from there. Having that blueprint is really important. So this is the blueprint that Summer Healing has created, that Amy's created specifically. which is predominantly based on Ashtanga, but with a few little tweaks and turns. For example, the beginning part would not necessarily be an Ashtanga. As we establish Ashtanga, might often just start going straight into the sun salutes as you warm up, whereas we would say, like number 6, yeah, you've got 6 points there before you start your sun salutes. And one of those, a lot of it's intention setting and welcoming and checking in and all that kind of thing. That we, that's a big part of our opening sequence itself. And then you've got warm up. So warm up is what we just talked about before, is that consideration of who we're teaching. We're teaching bodies that are coming from offices, coming from unions or wherever they've been, sitting at desks all day. So they might need a little more than just being able to go straight into your Surya Namaskara. So the first 5 parts, welcoming, checking in on injuries, spiritual, breath and physical intention, this doesn't necessarily have to be in that particular order, that particular breakdown, but these are just the considerations to bring into your opening sequence. But always good to consider all those elements. So what are they? Welcoming. What's welcoming?
Welcome to your Thursday Sunday
Welcome,
Jules.
welcome to Thursdays.
Why is it important to welcome people?
You might go like,
You've got to,
launching pad.
yeah, start
You got to
setting.
clear start. It's nice, isn't it?
You've got to start, yeah, you've got to, but
You've got to create a journey,
Mm.
beginning, start,
yeah,
end.
but this again, this is a new,
It's a Western
new
thing.
Western thing. Back at Shivananda, there was no welcome.
No, it's straight into it.
It's like, oh, everyone sit down.
I guess it marks the start, and you want to, so that people sort of know, right, I can leave everything else. It's a sort of shed.
Yeah, getting them to be present in this room. Like so much of our lives, we're running from one thing to another. It's sort of like, here, you're in this place for you now. Leave the outside behind. Be present.
We need to keep reminding people about that because again, we're not in the ashram, we're not in a place where we're just there to do yoga all day all night. People are dropping in for classes, they're doing drop-in classes. That's mostly what's being taught, drop-in classes, that's what you're teaching. So for people dropping into classes, like you said, they're being busy all day, busy with their lives, they're making their plans, they're doing all of that on the way to class on their phones, texting their friends, checking their Instagram posts and video, and then so they're coming in with all of that still rolling around in
I'm
their
going
head.
to cook for dinner when I get home.
So it's really useful and good to set that reminder. So in that you could even mention that, hey guys, don't forget to switch off your phones. Actually, your phones shouldn't even be in the class.
I think also like I've started sort of just making sure that they know that I've got their back for the next hour and 15 minutes. Like I've got, you don't have to think about anything, you can just surrender to your practice, and it's nice for them to sort of know, oh, that's such a nice thing to hear. It's also so that they know, the welcome's also so that they know who's got their back.
Absolutely, and this is also a really important thing because why are people coming to yoga? Yeah? Again, in the ashram, you go to yoga because you want to dedicate yourself to the spiritual practice, really, to the spiritual journey. And take some time out from the world and just hang out in the ashram for some time. Whereas here, it's like people are going to yoga, well, a lot of them actually just go because they think, I need to move my body, I need some physical exercise. So some of them actually just coming into that, initially at least, and then they start to realise, oh, there's more than just the physical part. I actually feel good mentally and emotionally afterwards too. And so then those who realise that are coming in for therapy, in a sense. It's a little part of their therapy, and their therapist would probably recommend also.
Yeah, the doctors are actually highly recommending
Go
yoga.
to
The doctors
yoga.
that I've been working with. I think it's also like what's been on my mind lately is why do we come here together to practice yoga, which is sitting with oneself and looking within. And I think it is that when you're doing your own practice, your mind's kind of teacher mode and like student mode. So we do come here to kind of surrender to our practice and be held and led in that practice by, guided, So
It takes a lot more discipline to just sit at home and do it yourself for an hour and a half or class.
I do it a lot and I like to do it, but I've got a different brain. I can't completely just surrender to the practice. I kind of, you've got the structure in your head and you can't, So it is nice to kind of just be guided.
So in that sense, we're creating, it's something quite unique. So compared to some of the other structures that were in place, which were this kind of intermediary of people in the ashram or people with a very dedicated yoga practice. Now it's a bit more like, yoga is a good thing for everybody. And so everybody can come and have a crack at it. Some people come and have that. Some people come back. Some people come more and more. And you want a more deeper practice, then you come and do your teacher training. And you go on retreats. And so, but as yoga teachers, we're teaching generally the general public that are coming in, dropping in. And so the type of classes that we're teaching are therapy, they are, in a sense, that opportunity to be able to be guided, be held, be contained within some kind of guidance and structure. So this opening sequence, this welcoming, which is also then the intention setting and the whole creating the safe space, becomes an important part of this modern day yoga that we're learning to teach. So, so it's important to welcome people, to remind them why they're here, to remind them what they need to maybe do is, to switch off their phones, switch off your mind as much as you can, letting go of the day, all these things. What else would you say to your students at the start of the class? Let go of the day, switch off your phones. Come into somewhere where we're working with ourselves, back to ourselves, nurturing ourselves through the practice. So, you can go to town with the way you do that, of course, as a holding of space, as a ceremony. We can also, that's within the atmosphere that we create, is also an important part of that as well. So, lighting incense or Palo Santo or lighting candles. This is where we bring in the music aspect, the right kind of music for that beginning part. Again, traditionally music's not part of the practice. It's certainly not essential, but in this modern day therapeutic way in which we're teaching, it can be a nice little add-on to enhance the experience of the students coming. As long as we choose the right kind of easy. That would be the right thing. Probably wouldn't want Metallica at the start, unless you go into a particular heavy metal class.
It has been,
It's up there, I believe.
oh, right, people have requested it.
Heavy metal yoga.
Yeah, Simon is into it, but it'd have to be quite a strong dynamic class.
Like a powerful.
Yeah.
It's like a Pilates, like.
Yeah.
What about the asking about the injuries bit?
We had a class about this last month. And
What
what
did you find out?
we did that day, we established that if somebody's really injured, they're going to come up and tell you about it. And if you ask about it, it sort of just opens things up for people to kind of talk about injuries they had 5 years ago. And that, this is Amy's suggestion anyway, to maybe not ask.
It takes forever. It's like, oh, my
It's
ankle's
sort of,
fixed.
and also, because if somebody is really injured, they will come up and tell you. But also an experienced yogi will know sort of how to work around it and what to ease off on potentially. So I think Nicole was here for that class. We're talking about asking about injuries. Yeah. So the suggestion was, they'll mention the war, what's your kind of take on that?
My take on it is the best way to approach that, really, my favourite way of approaching it, is more when you're checking the students in outside. And obviously, if there's a new student that you haven't seen before, because obviously when you're running regular classes, you get to know your students. So you get to know what's going on with the guidance. But bingo, a new student comes you've never seen before, and so just very gently say, hey, welcome, have you done much practice before? Any injuries, anything I need to know about? You just kind of casually talk about it then and there at that greeting point.
Since some teachers they quickly do it around the class before we start, it's like get settled.
Yeah, I do that sometimes. I like to ask for permission for adjustments. Again, in the past, we didn't bother so much about that, but nowadays, particularly when COVID happened, this whole thing became a bit more of an issue.
This is the only yoga studio I've been at that asks for permission.
For adjustment.
Really?
Like when I've been everywhere, it's like they'll adjust it as much as possible.
Yeah, and often I've been in studios where they don't even tell you they're there. You just get shoved into position. It's like,
I think, personally, I think it's a good practice to check in, to get permission with adjustments.
As a male, I would definitely ask every time.
Yeah, and particularly as a male.
I probably wouldn't even adjust anyone touching me. The casual class, I just feel like it's not worth it.
if you can do it verbally, you can just go, if you can just tilt, you can do it
But
verbally
also when
first.
we were doing some of the adjustments with Amy, we kind of worked out sometimes you don't need to actually adjust them, you need to
Jim, can
bring
you
your
open the door?
shoulder blades together, bring your shoulder blades together. So just
Yeah.
bringing their awareness to a point rather than
Yeah.
manipulating their whole body.
Yeah.
I like being manipulated, I like hands-on.
Yeah, I used to. No.
We were also talking though about, now throughout the class I might come around and do some hands-on adjustments, just please raise your hands and do it with the eyes closed so that nobody has to see anybody else saying, no, I don't want that. But also, we've also sort of established though, if you promise hands-on adjustments and you don't do it, people might go away feeling a bit ripped off, or I get touched.
Look, when it comes to adjusting, that is it's definitely a consideration. If you're announcing that you're offering adjustments,
I'm married to
It's-
adjustment.
Yes.
it's important to be careful with the way you offer that. I prefer to say, I do adjustments from time to time.
Yes.
So just checking in just in case they do come around if you're okay with it. But generally speaking, if you've put it out there that you want to adjust, that you're offering adjustments, and you get a blanket kind of like, no one's complaining, sort of whatever, wouldn't probably mind an adjustment, then I would say do your utmost best. It's not always possible. You do your utmost best to touch everyone. So this is like the opposite of like not touching anyone. So it means that maybe you're just coming around. You know, put your arms out. Just put your arms out. So maybe you're coming around and you've done some amazing deep adjustments with certain people because they needed it or that worked right. But you're coming around and it's just like, well, I haven't got to the floor yet. I've got no time. Even just like that little.
I know, I thought you were doing that because I was doing the posture really well.
Like even just a gentle touch of just like acknowledging their pose, or just a quick little direction of how it could go or should go.
And then also, if you touch everybody, like it's not, oh well, he touched me and didn't touch anybody
Well, exactly.
else. So,
So
Amy also said, like, if you're adjusting one person, speak out the adjustment for the whole room so that they can,
yeah.
demonstration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be good. Blanket
Yeah.
lesson for everybody.
But I often will be in a class, in a pose, and I'll hear the teachers sort of adjusting somebody else, and I'll do it irrespective of if I'm in the right.
Me
Like,
too.
I don't know, actually, I felt better to begin with.
I do too.
But it's good to sort of know, like, I like to know the specificity.
So some studios, for example, Virgin Active, where I've still got a job,
You do, yeah.
and they've got adjustment tokens. All the maths,
Oh,
the maths at the top of the
yeah.
map, they've got it's a yes or a no token.
Oh,
And so at the start of the class, I always mention it. Maybe sometimes even during the warm-up, I'll just say, oh, by the way, you've all got those tokens, yes or no. If you want adjustments, you can change it any time.
that's great. I'm going to incorporate that. If you wanted adjustments, bring a $10 note and.
Even though at first I thought it was a bit cheesy, but I actually quite like it. I've learned to appreciate it because then it's just clear and simple. You don't have to. No one needs to, because it can still be a bit confronting if your hands up if you don't want to be adjusted. It's like, oh, what's wrong with him or her if she doesn't want to be adjusted?
And when Layla taught her class, I think we had our eyes closed and she was like, if you don't, I made you adjustments if you're not like to put your hand on your heart now so that nobody else could see, and also it wasn't a big like,
Yeah.
It was I was like, oh, I like that one, that's a good one too.
Yeah, that's a good one for sure. So that is something that needs to be incorporated into that beginning part as well, if you're planning to offer adjustments. And going back to that just quickly, I know there's different opinions on that. Some schools and some teachers are very much like no need or avoiding adjustments. And particularly when you're a new teacher, you might not be comfortable adjusting because it takes a bit of practice to adjust well. But I am of the school that I think there are useful adjustments, and I think that most people very much benefit from them, and most people really enjoy it or really appreciate it. So I highly encourage learning to adjust along your journey as a teacher. I mean, again, we go back a couple of decades and more traditional yoga was very adjustment focused. There was a lot of adjusting. That was a good way to be able to to refine the practice, which is what we were teaching as teachers. Spiritual, breath, and physical intention. What can you tell me about those three? How do they differ? And how do we bring that into the open sequence? What's a spiritual intention then?
Well, it's sort of working more on the inner man. Working on the inner man, sort of your thought processes, I guess, or sort of lack thereof. Yeah. I've been trying to fuse though having one intention that covers all those three things. Just say, just kind of streamline.
Yeah, you don't necessarily want to say, right, first of all, let's talk about our spiritual intention. And then we're going to talk about our breath intention, and then we're going to focus on our physical intention. I mean, you could, depending on the kind of class you're planning to teach. But generally speaking, you would just...
Yeah, have one intention, but you might, so we're talking about the breath. And so the breath, how does it make you feel? Like how do you, when you're breathing, if you're stressed, how do you feel? Like bringing in contact with that, but then also the breathing in the postures, like, so you're holding your breath or breathe deeply. On the exhale, deepen your posture, like keep the breath all the way
incorporate
through.
it into the other aspects.
And then I suppose that, as you're winding down, think about how you breathed in class today, your awareness of your breath, how you take that out in the world with you. You can use your breath at any time to, to just stop and breathe. If you're feeling stressed or tense or upset, to take some of the tools we've learned today in class and the awareness, take that out into the world. So you've covered your sort of your physical, your spiritual, and your, you've just got the one thing that covered all that. That's how I do it.
That's great. That's fantastic. And that's definitely a way you could do it. Saying that, you might also just decide with this class, I'm really going to focus it on just working our hips.
Yeah, hip
It's like
openers.
a hip opening class. So
Right, I've been going way too deep. Yeah,
So-
those two things are very simple and surface. Okay.
So then it's like this, guys, we're focusing on the hips. So that's where we're going to work a lot of us on the hips. But saying that, even then, you can still say, you might even mention, the hips is where we store a lot of our emotion.
Yeah.
Yes, because you want to know what is it about the breath? What is it about the hips? Like that, what's the intention with the breath? Because just breathing is.
So the intention is to be aware of your breath today in class and how it makes you feel. How you
But
can.
why?
Yeah. The why. How. Why.
I want a bit more info making in class. Yeah. I guess people kind of, some students won't even it'll just wash. They won't even pick up on the nuances of it.
But, I mean, you can go to town here.
You can also convolute it. You can also get really there's too many things. Yeah. So it is nice to kind of streamline. Yeah, just breath or pratyahara,
And when we come down to, okay, well, what sort of percentage of time do we allocate each of these sections? It's kind of like, I mean, there's no absolute there, but what we've been doing now, doing our class track, we divided it into 4 sections, just for the easy convenience of each teacher. And so the first quarter of the class is generally those first 6 points. Up until the sun salutes, you've got around about a quarter of the class allocated to that. So if it's an hour class, it's 15 minutes allocated to your welcome, your checking in, your intention setting, and your warm-up. Now what that can also include, which is not there, but here, it's not here. But what that could also include, and probably should also include, is an element of pranayama and or meditation. Now, not that that has to be in that opening sequence, that could be at the end. I mean, it can be essentially anywhere in the class, but I would say at the beginning or at the end is usually the most common and the better time to allocate that out of the practice. And again, because we're structuring this as a vinyasa class, there is a big focus on the physical asana vinyasa element, compared to, let's say, we're going back to the hatha style of what I was doing, where you would do 20 minutes of just pranayama out of a 2-hour class at the start, which was probably a bigger chunk than what you might have here. But saying that, it's always good to allocate a little bit of pranayama and or meditation, because essentially part of yoga practice. You go back to the 8 limbs, it's like just as important, if not more important, than the asana itself. The asana is just an 1/8 of limbs, whereas in a vinyasa class, the asana is 75% of the class, more or less, about 100%. So, yeah, so still good to allocate a bit of that time. Warm-up, what do we do in warm-ups?
Like these little twists like this.
Side bends, twists. You're warming up the body, you're stretching.
Cow.
Like isolations kind of just sort of warm into the twist.
And you're very stable, aren't you? Like you can't really do yourself, just like
Yeah.
Then the wrist the other way, yeah.
This is where, I mean, we've got no set sequences for this really, although you learn them from other teachers and incorporate those into our sessions. But, typical postures or movements that just warm up the body. They shouldn't be too overly challenging. They should just be nice and kind of warming up. But like Sam said, like, I think it's always really useful and important, I believe, to have a little twist at the start in some form or another. So often we start seated, but today we started standing. So you can start standing. You can also start lying down. Some teachers like to start you lying down. Lying down is also a beautiful way to start, so you can get a lot of those elements while people are lying down. It's the intention setting and all the rest. Lie down. Lying down is like a way to relax before you start. It's a nice way to begin. And if you are starting lying down, then you can also continue lying down with your warm-up. So you've started in a shavasana essentially. So why not then start the warm-up? Stretch the arms over the head, stretch one side, stretch the other.
Banana asana.
Do a couple of twists, one way, another way. Bring the knees in, like your baby. You can do quite a bit on your back.
I had some leg raises in mine I started on the floor on Thursday night. Had some secret leg raises and some sit-ups. Yeah, got that core on the way.
Get a bit of core
Yeah,
into it straight away too.
Nice.
Core work at the start, I think, is also really useful. I think nice to have a little bit of a stretch first, in some way or
Yeah.
other. As I said, a little twist is always good because twists help to reset the spine. And often we come into the class and we've been kind of hanging out during the day in sort of bad ways for the body. So just to kind of prick and crack, you're kind of cracking the back into place just through a simple twist. It doesn't have to be a complicated twist, just if you're seated, just one of those is all you need to help to just realign the spine before you start doing the more dynamic work. So I think that's an important part of that warm-up, should always be a little twist of it. And then everything else up to your discretion. Sequences, open up the spine, warm up your shoulders, warm up your hips, all the joints of the body that are going to be used in the further asanas. And then also, there can be a consideration of, well, what's my class going to look like? What are the main, let's say, more challenging asanas that I'm going to be exploring today? What are the areas of the body that need to be a little more open to explore that? So, for example, this morning in my class at Virgin, I got them, we started with cat-cow, we did then the pointer dog, that one there, to get a bit of core. And then I said, right, now we're going to come into pigeon pose, because often pigeon pose is done a little later in the class, but you can do it fairly early. And my intention was, let me get into pigeon pose, because soon we're going to work with the hips a little bit. So I just want to warm up, open up the hips a little bit. So we did a pigeon, we did a little pigeon twist, and then afterwards I said, right, now we're going to come back to that pointer dog, and we're going to do what I call the awkward aeroplane. So you bring your left arm out to the side, then you open up the right knee out to one side, and you stretch the right leg right out. So that pose like that doesn't maybe necessarily look all that hard. It's really challenging.
It is.
Yes, really, it lives up to its name.
Is that its real name, Awkward Aeroplane?
It's the name I got taught somewhere along the line, so that's what I use. And it makes for a bit of fun. You have a bit of fun with it. Don't kick your neighbours. Awkward, isn't it? That kind of thing. So, your warm-up can be just sequences which are just things that you know, that you're comfortable with, but also it could be good to consider, well, where am I going in this class today? What's the good pose leading up to it? Just a little bypass this book here, the Yoga Sequencing. I think I've recommended it before. If you haven't seen it,
I think I bought it.
a great book by Mark Stevens, not the Mark Stevens that used to be here. And this is a great book because it gives you a stack of possible sequences which are often focused on different things. So your physical intentions are there. This is advanced level sequence number 30, focus on forward bends. But here we go, this is sequence 37, yoga for the first trimester of pregnancy. So the whole sequence, and so forth. So, this one's based on the Anahata Chakra class. This one's, on the various chakras or whatever. So, stimulating class for intermediate students. One on the classes focused on the doshas, a pitta balancing class. So a great resource for sequences already all there.
I've been doing it the hard way all this time.
But what I was also going to say was that they've got also a good reference of actual postures, and within the reference of the postures, they'll tell you not really cues, but they'll identify preparatory asanas for that pose. So, for example, let's just see. For example, Bakasana, the crane pose. Identifying preparatory asanas, opening what needs to be open, your wrist flexors, your shoulder elevators and retractors, your back extensors, your hip extensors, and your ankle dorsiflexors. Those are the areas of the body that need to be open for this particular pose. So what are the asanas for opening? Balasana, Idalasana, Garudasana, Malasana, Marichyasana, Prasarita, Palottanasana, and so forth. And this, all the poses that will work on those areas of the body that need to be well established for that particular pose. What needs to be stable? Your wrist synergists, your elbow synergists, your shoulder stabilizers, so forth and so forth. What asanas stabilize? Adho Mukha Svanasana, Idalasana, Chaturanga Dandasana, and so forth. Then it tells you, well, what does this pose prepare you for? It prepares you for, obviously, more advanced versions of this kind of balance, such as Titipasana, Parsvabhakasana, Ekapada Kundinyasana, and so forth. What are some of the counter poses? Uttam Mukha Svanasana, Adho Mukha Svanasana, wrist therapy, Balasana, and so forth. So, yeah, a good book, one that would be good to have in your life. So as part of your planning, class planning, well, where am I going to go? Maybe my peak pose today is going to be, Bakasana, the crane pose. So let's go have a look at that. What's it telling us? What's going to be good preparatory stuff? What do we need to open up in the body? You don't even need the book necessarily. You just come into the pose and work it out yourself. All right, it's going to work on the wrists really strongly. Oh, I need a bit of good core strength here. I need the hips open. Opens the hips, pushing. Or, lunges, open the hips. Let's do a bit of that as part of our warm-up. What about the wrists? Okay, let's do a bit of work, some of those ones. Start putting pressure on the wrists and warming up the wrist joints, and so forth. So that's just to suggest that your warm-up isn't just, oh yeah, a couple of cat-cows and a twist and she'll be right, mate. It can be, but also a consideration for what's the plan? What's the plan? Where are we going to go in this class? So what's important to prepare, warm up? So then, once you've done your first, let's say, around about quarter of the class, through your intention settings and your welcomings and your warm-ups, what's next?
Sun
Sun
salutations.
salutations. Shall we do one just to get a little vibe?
Another one, didn't we do that yesterday?
Good question. How many sun salutations do we do?
Oh, didn't we say we do 2 or 3? So 2 or 3?
Yeah, I was thinking, I guess would be like 3.
Yeah.
I like 3. I like
Three?
the number 3.
All right, 3. 3.
I
I
suggest
do 0. I've been doing half of it now.
Okay.
Yeah, we identified that I hate it. Oh, not my vibe.
Who's leading it today?
Okay.
Surya Namaskara.
You would know this one from yesterday.
Oh, did I do that one yesterday? No, I didn't see
No,
it
that
yesterday.
was-
Oh, we did 8 together.
That wasn't 8, was it?
It was aim, but aim you increase that up and up if you want to.
Your variation.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Well, what did I do yesterday? Standing Tadasana, feet slightly apart, grounding through the floor, ankles, knees, hips aligned. Take a breath here. We are going to do hands to the sky, forward fold, halfway lift, forward fold, right step back, knee to the ground. Back, arms to the sky. You can stretch your back. Frame your front foot. Left foot back to plank. Inhale knees, exhale chest and chin to floor through chaturanga. Up to cobra or upward dog. Exhale. And step your right foot forward, left foot forward, hold, and come to Tadasana. Arms to prayer, Tadasana. And now we'll do that again on the other side. Hands to sky, forward fold, halfway lift, forward fold, left foot back, knee to the floor. Arms to sky, no lunge, feel that stretch, frame your front foot, right foot back to plank, chaturanga, knees, exhale, chin, chest to floor, inhale, upward dog, exhale, downward dog, left foot forward, right foot forward, and come to the sky. Hands to prayer, Tadasana.
So just to clarify though, that is a traditional Surya Namaskar. It's not Surya Namaskar,
No.
which is okay. That's what we just did. And the only other thing just to mention with that was great. Well done. It's you've got it all there as far as traditional. It's great. You can definitely do it that way. But just to mention, when you're talking chaturanga, chaturanga dandasana is that. It's the push-up first.
It's a push-up first,
And,
okay.
yeah. If you're bringing us to the knees,
Knees.
chest and chin, that's called Ashtanga Namaskar.
Really?
And that's what we do in the traditional,
Uh-huh.
but it's not called chaturanga.
Chaturanga.
So chaturanga is the push-up. You can do the variation of chaturanga on the knees, then you would just come down like that.
Okay.
Rather than, that's quite specific. Ashtanga Namaskar means, Ashtanga is the 8 limbs,
Yeah.
Ashtanga. Ashtanga yoga is the 8 limbs of yoga. And so what the Ashtanga Namaskar is saying, 8 points of contact. So you've got your hands, 2 knees, 2 feet. That's 6 points of contact. Your 7th is your chin and your 8th is your chest.
So that's...
They're the 8 points of contact on the floor, which is why they call it Ashtanga Namaskar. Namaskar, I guess, is still part of the Namaskar sequence.
So do you drop, so you go from push-up to chaturanga, like an inch off the floor, how long do you hover? Do you drop completely always, or is it,
Well,
is it even that?
no, in traditional Ashtanga, you don't drop.
No,
If-
that's what
if you're able to, you don't
Yeah.
drop. But obviously, the drop is the variation for those who need to drop.
Is it better than if you can't sort of, if you need to kind of drop all the way, is it easier, is it better than to kind of do that?
Come to the middle.
Well, the 8 point.
It depends. I mean, I think when you're doing the 8 point, you're doing a specific style of their coming down, which is more aligned with that traditional hatha style. So sometimes it's better to, just decide which style you're doing, which way you're going with it, and stick to that. So the way I prefer to do it is if you're doing a bit more Ashtanga-based style, traditional vinyasa style, where you're encouraging the chaturanga, then for me the variation is to the knees and then just elevating the body down, not to be too fussed about that,
Yeah.
just to come down so that then you're in position to still come into an upward dog. then you might come back down to use the knees and the body to then bring you both down and back up to your downward dog.
So what was the Ashtanga what?
Ashtanga Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Namaskar. Namaskar means salute. It's the way we salute. That's why it's called sun salutes. Surya Namaskar. Surya Sun Namaskar is the salute. Excuse me, I'm just going to
Because when we were doing it yesterday, we were doing the knees, chest, knee, and leg pulling each other under, weren't we?
Can't remember what I called it, but we definitely went these first.
Yeah.
Chaturanga is always an inch off the ground.
No, this is good. I'm learning something new every day.
I like yours more with the instead of going back, like feet back to plank, you have like a lunge in between.
I like it because
Oh,
you can actually like open your hips and also
Yeah.
bend easier.
Yeah. I think it's much
I
better.
like this variation.
Yeah. And yesterday was just
Yeah.
like going through it.
I think that yesterday was like traditional and also very 108. Very short but condensed.
Which is fair enough.
Yeah, I like that hip opening. Oh.
But I've still got so much to learn.
Is everyone coming next Friday?
Yeah.
Public holiday?
Yeah.
What's
Saturday?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just thought I'd people know before that, like the only person here.
No, I think it's my partner for my husband's due. He managed his pub, so
Oh,
I reckon he'll be working grand final day.
oh, I'd say so.
Unless the Brisbane Lions win tonight.
It was like an all state final.
Well, whoever there's three at work, one guy supports Geelong, Stuart supports the Lions, and somebody else supports, and they're all, so they're working out whoever's team in the grand final gets it on.
Yeah, okay.
Alright, that's a good system.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's at Brisbane Lions and Geelong tonight. You're not an AFL fan?
I haven't watched the game for over a decade, but I try to keep up to date with a bit of watercolour talk.
Yeah,
So I can-
I'm not a fan, I only know this because I'm hearing it.
Yeah, yeah.
And all the boys were over at our house on Saturday night to watch the game, like.
Like how about those cats saying?
So back to sun salutes. So again, you got to make your choice for what's the sort of style I'm teaching, which is the direction I'm going. So a traditional Surya Namaskar is a bit more usually used in a hatha class, but then we also have this thing that we sometimes call hatha vinyasa or hatha flow. Yeah.
Yes,
So
isn't that what Jules is teaching at the
No,
blog?
I'm just doing the gentle hatha without sun salutations because it's too late to generate that type of energy at that time of night, 7:30. I'm keeping it just really out of alignment.
So there you go. So
Yeah.
it will depend upon what's the purpose, what's your intention, how you work in your class. But we're going back to a traditional, what we're focusing, or where I guess coming from, Ashtanga. Ashtanga, it's Surya, they start with Surya Namaskara A, and then Surya Namaskara B. So those are the traditional Ashtanga ways of starting the sequence. So we suggest that we start with some sun salutations. We haven't specified Surya A, traditional, Surya B. My suggestion is generally to think about Surya A as the foundational vinyasa that you want to begin with. Doesn't have to be. If you're a bit more aligned to having a bit more of a hatha element of your class and you want to go traditional, that's okay. But just generally speaking, because also if we're talking about this sequencing way where we've got the vinyasa element, that particular vinyasa element is pretty much the vinyasa element that we use in Surya A and Surya B. So what is that vinyasa element? Any idea what the vinyasa element is? The vinyasa in number 9, number 11, number 13, number 15, number 17.
The Chaturanga, Tandasana, and Upward Dog and Downward Dog.
Chaturanga, upward dog, downward dog. So that is the reset, that's the reintegration part of the vinyasa section, which is what is done in Surya A. It's also part of Surya B. Like we just did with Nicole in traditional, it's not. It's different. If you have the Ashtanga Namaskar as part of it. It's still similar, and you could make it that way if you wanted to, and call it a vinyasa class or hatha flow or something like that.
I'll just ask some questions because I've been printed, like I had a B. This is a C sequence, and it says knees, chest to chin, and this one doesn't, it's chaturanga, but I've been looking at that and assuming it's that, but that isn't, that's what.
Yeah.
So we've just gone to plank, knees to chest to chin, but that's the, what do we call it? The
So this sequence C is essentially your traditional. Yeah?
Yeah.
Sequence C is your traditional way. Surya B and Surya A is more your Ashtanga focused way.
Okay.
Yeah?
So they're at the, because I've been sort of
So
using
A,
those as my props.
A, B, and C. So this version of C is the same as traditional. You know, it's its own version. Like the one we did in Shivananda was a little bit different. Didn't bring the hands up. There was no halfway lift. There was no Ardha Uttanasana. Yeah. But it's focused. It's based on traditional Surya. Whereas your A and your B are more the Ashtanga versions, which is see, the thing is, it can take a while to master all these sun salutations, both in your own practice and to teach them. So, if you're ready and able to do that, then please go ahead. If you've got to focus on one, focus on A.
Okay.
Get that one down pat first,
Alright.
and then move on to the other ones.
Okay.
Particularly if you're intending to teach vinyasa. You're going to be a vinyasa yoga teacher, focus on your A, get that down pat.
Okay.
I found that video that Amy sent really helpful yesterday, that to break it down, yeah, because even just because I've been getting really frustrated with my sun's salutations, and that's why I left yesterday. I didn't want to do 208 the way that I've been doing them. I wanted to break down and get a bit muscle memory, but that, even just where they say, you know, like, place the weight goes into the toes, and then the weight, you know, like I want to, yeah, that one, yeah, it's really helpful. Just to, I wanted to really break it down and look at the nuances of transitions.
She said like 6 lines the last one.
Yeah, the last one's great. I found that really helpful. Because I think we move through them so fast in vinyasa classes that I realised I'd started to sort of embellish. After doing it for 25 years, I've started to really question. And I wanted to learn it afresh. Yeah.
So anyway, we're not going to, we've got to move on because
Yes.
we don't have much time left and
Dawn's teaching.
we're still at the very start. We're we're not even halfway through. But we're going to get faster now because we're not focusing on the postures with as much as we really want to focus on the sun salutes as well. But just to give you that indication that sun salutes is section number 7 in this sequence. And how many sun salutes do we do? Well, that depends on what your intention is, the way you're going to structure the class. But let's say as a general rule of thumb and a general average, 3 Surya A's and your sun salutes are done. Maybe you want to make it a stronger class, you've got a more dynamic crew in the house that, you know, maybe wanting a further challenge. So maybe you say, okay, I'm going to do 3 Surya A's followed by 6 Surya B's. Maybe, yeah, just saying. That could be a thing, yeah, because you're wanting to really ramp it up. But, you know, that means your sun salute section will take up a lot longer of the class. But that becomes a fairly dynamic class just by doing that. Yeah? And then you kind of just sneak in all the rest of it very quickly. Because if you have a bit more time, you can lengthen a bit more the other parts. But from the sun salutations, we go into standing poses. Now, all of these standing poses, number 8, 10 lateral poses, 12 standing balancing poses, 14 twist, standing twists. Now, all of those are kind of chunks of potential poses that we have been looking at, or we will look at, as specific lectures. So you probably have, most of you, done at least some of those chunks of poses. So we might have done lateral extensions as a lecture, which is lateral poses. What are the lateral poses? What are some examples of some lateral poses? Any ideas?
Oh my god, I can't see.
Extended side angle.
Thank you, that's
Sideways poses, aren't they, really?
Yeah, it's
I've been loving gate lately.
great. Good one.
It's my favourites. I'll come to my class
I
Thursday.
know. I'll be there this time.
Trikonasana.
Trikonasana,
Another one.
yeah, we could go
Yeah.
on.
So again, I don't want to go into too much detail because we're covering all those within the lectures themselves, but your standing poses, your first, after your sun salutes, your standing poses, well, what's your classic standing pose? Tadasana. So that's kind of like your other reset baseline, where you come back to where you start from, in a sense. So after your Surya Namaskars, you usually come into Tadasana as a way to integrate the Suryas, and then maybe work on some other standing poses from there. What are some of the other standing poses? Like Warrior 1, Warrior 2, your warriors, lunges, yep, these are all standing poses. Half moon is more of a standing balancing pose. Yeah. So that would be more under section number 12, the balancing. Now, this is where we don't necessarily have to say, all right, I've got to do those. It says here lateral at number 10, then you've got to do your balancing, and then you've got to do your twist. You don't have to particularly follow this order. Okay? It's not strict that we have to. I mean, if we were in Ashtanga, yes, it says that you do this pose and then you do that pose. But the idea is that you want to, between number 8 and 14, these are all your standing poses, yeah?
You don't really need to do, you can skip vinyasa, right? In the middle.
Well, you could, yes. But this is where the vinyasa part becomes, you're turning this into a vinyasa part. And it's not so much that you might skip vinyasa, the vinyasa element, but then maybe how do we incorporate this to become a flow, rather than it's just going to be a class. You just say, So those of you who come to my class, for example, you know, I create a flow, generally speaking, where I use my version then of the sun salute to become the foundation, which then I start adding in all those other elements into that flow. So that's the vinyasa element that I grew up. I'm like, okay, start with just the basic flow, the basic sun salute, and then now we're going to add in one or two. We're going to add in side angle. We're going to add in side plank. The balancing pose. We're going to add in a Gomukasana, and so forth. Yeah. So that's, I guess, where you have a little bit more freedom, but you essentially would want to incorporate at least one of all of those as part of your vinyasa sequence. Standing, some kind of standing pose, some kind of lateral extension pose, bring in a bit of balance, and bring in a twist.
Just one.
Well, it doesn't have to be just one, it can be a few. But I would say at least one. At least one of each. And because most of these are going to be two sides, then you've got to work out, so how, this becomes the creative, your creative freedom, and this is where you have to have a bit of pre-planning of like, okay, how am I going to make this flow? How does it now become with us? This is this 8 to 14 section in this sequence becomes the core part, really, of what makes it vinyasa.
It's like flowing between sides.
Flow between sides. Are we incorporating, are we just doing one side of all the poses first, and then all the other side of all the poses? Or are we doing one pose, vinyasa, same pose on the other side, vinyasa. Next pose, vinyasa. Same pose on the other side, vinyasa. So this is where there's no absolute way of doing that, but what we're suggesting here is that you want to incorporate at least one of all those types of poses to really make it that full class, getting the experience, full workout, full exploration of all the possibilities. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that becomes, your sun salutes, and that part becomes your section 2. Although, this is where we might say, well, actually, that's a bit more than just a section 2.
It's a long section too.
Yeah. So this is where, when we break it up, sometimes someone will just focus on the sun salutes as section 2. And then sometimes you incorporate sun salutes and all those vinyasa standing elements as section 2. So your section 2 could go a bit longer, as in by the time you get down to the floor. So when you get to number 16, seated forward bends, this is implying that now we've come down to the ground, our floor.
Yeah, like we're not going to go back up.
No. And again,
Anyway,
No, like that's when we've been doing our class planning, that's kind of what's got me.
yeah.
Vinyasa seated bends, oh, we're back to vinyasa again.
now, when it says, okay, let's say, okay, we've done our careful planning with our standing poses with vinyasa, either one side at a time or vinyasa between poses or whatnot. And then it's like you have this moment of like, and now we're coming down onto the ground, yeah? Coming down to do that seated forward bends as the first section of the floor work. So up until now we're doing standing work, and now we're doing floor work. But then it's like, hold on, but there's a vinyasa between our floor work. This is where I would suggest that your vinyasa part becomes optional. Okay?
Oh, wait, yeah.
Okay?
Because you're on the ground.
Because you're on the ground, Now, going back to Ashtanga, when they get to the ground, then they're still doing the vinyasa between their postures, which is why Amy has incorporated that here. And you definitely can, if you want it to be a more dynamic class, then once you're down on the ground, doing the floor work, adding the vinyasa elements, keeps up the dynamic aspect of the practice. Yeah? If you're coming down on the ground and you're letting go of the vinyasa, generally speaking, the energy starts to lower down and drop.
Yeah, you feel like your class is almost a stretching class.
Yeah, you're
What's the
coming,
wind down?
coming to the wind down. So this is again your choice. What's the intention of my class? Is it a wind? Sorry?
Oh my God, sorry.
Yes. Are you right on the floor?
Yeah.
I'll move like 4 steps.
Sorry?
I'm trying to move like 4 steps.
Yeah, that would be good.
You know how it's going to behave.
Well, we'll just move back out there. I mean, we're kind of almost there. I just want to we're pretty much almost there. We're just going to...
It makes sense because I was thinking before in that second section where it was like doing a vinyasa between each side almost felt like too many vinyasas.
Yeah.
But
So, brings us to the last little part. So, when we come down to our seated section, our floor work, that's when we have that choice. Okay, we're going to make it more dynamic and have the vinyasas in between, or are we not? So that's that would definitely be the optional part. But what do we want to incorporate on the floor? Some seated forward bends, which again is another whole lecture. What are some of the seated forward bends that we know?
Janushasana.
Yep.
Classic.
Classic forward bend. What's that in Sanskrit? Anyone know?
Yeah, I don't know actually.
Standard.
Yeah.
Standard.
Anyone know?
So Dandasana is staff.
Paschimottanasana. Paschimottanasana.
butterfly.
Butterfly can be
Butterfly
one.
is seated forward.
Yes. And then back bends. Back bends.
You're not going to demonstrate
Camel.
You're like just
Camel. Yeah. Camel pose.
camel, bridge.
Bridge.
Is bridge a back bend or an
Yes.
inversion?
Both.
Both.
Definitely back bend.
What did I have in mind?
That was a bit more of an inversion. Yeah.
Oh,
Wheel
well.
pose.
Pardon?
Wheel pose.
Wheel.
Uddhva-dhanurasana. Which again now here's an interesting thing that we've been talking about before about northern and southern style of yoga and the different names. This is where we've got a real mix-up because in the southern style, from Krishnamacharya's lineage, the back bend, the what we call the wheel pose, is actually Uddhva-dhanurasana, which means upturned bow pose.
Yeah, I
So actually it is upturned bow. That's the way it should be called if we're sticking to the southern style. But somehow we've all adopted the northern style's name, which is chakrasana, and the chakra is a wheel. And so it's the wheel pose. So it's the wheel pose from chakrasana, but using Uddhva-dhanurasana just to confuse things. Just to mix it all up. But you know what? I personally just find it easier to say it that way. I just say wheel pose, Uddhva-dhanurasana. And sometimes I'll just spill out the whole thing. Wheel pose, which is chakrasana. We call it Uddhva-dhanurasana, which is the upturned bow. Upturned bow or upward bow. And then twists. So we've got here supine twists. What are supine twists?
Ones which on our back.
Ones which are on our back. But then what about seated twists?
So yeah, so there was a 19A seated twist.
You put in a 19A.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think seated twist. Or spine twist we can just all.
So this, yes, you can make a choice of doing one or the other, or doing
you add it with the forward bend?
You
Just
can-
sort of- yeah.
I was just going to say, I find that a seated twist works well after forward bend. I mean, it is very nice to twist the body also after a back bend. Twists help to reset from the back bends. So this is where you might decide, well, what flows well if it's vinyasa? If you're doing your Uddhva Dhanurasana, what happens? You land back down on your back. So what's a nice flow there is a supine twist, really. You come down from Uddhva Dhanurasana, you bring your knees to your chest. Naturally, it almost works in a natural progression to twist on the back. Whereas if you're doing a camel pose, let's say, you come back down on your knees, it almost works well to then flow into a seated twist from that. So,
You don't make the journey too far.
no,
Yeah.
unless you've decided that you're going to do a bit more of a dynamic class
Yeah.
and you're still incorporating the vinyasas between the postures or sets of postures on the floor work. Then it doesn't matter. Then you might do your Uddhva Dhanurasana, come down, vinyasa into a seated twist, and that's absolutely fine. So again, these are the elements that we want to have in there. Some forward bending, some back bends, some supine twists, and then we've got number 20, inversions. Inversions, which here are towards the end of the class. Remember when I was at Shivananda, the inversions were done at the start of the class. I would suggest to stick to this method. Leave Shivananda to Shivananda. And
Inversion is shoulder stand. and
shoulder
handstand.
stand, headstand, handstand, forearm balance, Pincha Mayurasana.
How postures kind of superstar.
Some of them can be power postures, definitely. But a good natural progressive sequence is from your headstand to your shoulder stand, plow, back to shoulder stand, down into fish pose. Vajra, Shavasana.
The headstand first with an inversion.
Yes, generally. Again, depends. The Gita sequence, which is another Hatha style, which I also learned to teach, which has its own specific sequencing. The headstand is last. You do shoulder stand, fish, then headstand. And
Headstand feels like the hardest.
it definitely is. The reason why you would do a shoulder stand after headstand is just naturally and then a fish after that is to stretch and reset the neck, which comes under pressure in your headstand. So in your headstand, the neck's getting a little pressed.
Yeah.
So with your shoulder stand and your fish pose, you're naturally taking away that compression that happens in your headstand. So physically, it really makes a lot of sense to do headstand, shoulder stand, fish pose in that order. But if it, again, it depends on what's the intention, what's the focus. In Gita, they focus on the sequence of the chakras and the endocrine glands. So the throat comes before, throat for your thyroid gland, so your shoulder stand comes first, then your pituitary gland, your fish pose, and then your headstand finally, your pineal gland. It's upside down. So, yeah, it's all about what's your intention, what's the focus. So if you decided, well, I want to do a class that focuses on working through the endocrine glands, then work out, well, where are these endocrine glands and which are the postures that are focusing on those, and work them in that order. Or I'm working on a class that's focusing on working through the chakras, the same, or what are the postures that are focusing on the particular chakras. So your sequencing is always flexible according to, well, what's the intention of my class, what am I teaching, what am I doing, what am I trying to achieve. But coming back to this as our foundational blueprint, particularly if we maybe don't have a specific, really kind of convoluted journey story in mind, then this is a great foundation where it's come from, go to. Shavasana is the end, of course. It doesn't have to be the absolute end. We might
Die before you die.
die before we die. We might sit up afterwards and do some meditation, throw in the pranayama at the very end. Yeah?
You haven't made it until you die before you die. Success.
Yes, Shavasana. Or we all take a sacrament. Sacrament. Add abdominal yoga and arm balances where you like. So that's the optional extra. Now we talked about some of that abdominal yoga at the start, can be quite good. A lot of classes actually like the abdominal stuff towards the end. Like, sort of, yeah. So that's definitely an option too.
I guess it's also where it just might naturally fit.
Like you're on your back already.
Yeah, because I did it at the start last week because you're already there, and I just thought I'll trick you. I'm not gonna relax.
Yeah. It's a bit of a last hurrah too. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
Shavasana's
nice.
coming, but let's come on.
Yeah.
Let's not
It's cool.
get there too easily. Let's
Wait for it.
let's work for our Shavasana.
Yeah, that's it.
And the same as arm balancing. Arm balancing could be as part of that main vinyasa standing posture section.
Yeah.
So even though we're focusing on those main elements of the standing postures, for example, when you're coming to your standing twists, so your typical standing twist, of course, is your twisted lunge. You might say, well, hey, let's bring in an arm balance. Bring your hands down and plug your feet off the floor. Bingo, you're in Ekapada Kundinyasana. Hey! So that could be a nice place for bringing in an arm balance.
Looks very easy.
Make it look easy,
Yes.
of course.
I might
Another,
be like smashing the floor.
another nice place that I find to bring in the arm balances is as part of your transition from standing to sitting postures. Yeah. So, for example, you might decide, you've finished your last, twisted pose, standing, vinyasa, whatever, and you say, all right, now we're going to come down maybe into Malasana, yogi squat as a nice way to transition, and then from there, how about a Bakasana? A great place to get into that arm balance or its variations, and then you've kind of done some good core challenging stuff, and then it's like, we come down on the ground and there's a bit of a reward going into your seated holds after some strong, challenging balancing poses. And that, my dear friends, completes the sequencing of the sequences.
That's a wrap. That's a wrap. Thank you. Namaste.
Any questions? There's probably a lot of big questions, but that's why I highly recommend you photocopy that, stick it on your wall,
Yeah.
learn the sequence as your foundation, and enjoy being creative in the way in which you paint it, deliver it.
Reminds me a little bit of like you'll appreciate this old breakdancing routine. You do your top rock,
Yeah.
sort of self-rotation, to like warm up.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't just go straight into a head spin.
Yeah.
You need sort of like, you have your particular moves